Welcome back. Let the cash flow in. In the weeks since Vice President Kamala Harris's candidacy for president was announced, her campaign has raised a staggering $200 million in small dollar donations and has garnered historic enthusiasm. We'll talk about if this will last, the benefits of this, and what may increase this enthusiasm going forward. Plus, I'm sharing my exclusive interview with newly appointed State Representative Nicole Grassi to discuss her appointment, her background, and policy priorities in her first interview since taking office. We'll be talking about those stories and more today, July 29th, 2024. From Ishan Media, this is the Ishan S. Show, with me, your host, Ishan. Welcome back to the Ishan S. Show. Thank you so much for joining us. Happy Monday. Stay tuned for my sit-down with State Representative Nicole Grassi in the second half of this episode. It's her first interview since taking office, and we had a great chat about all sorts of things. So stick around for that in the second half. But before we get there, I want to talk about this past week for Kamala Harris's candidacy, which has honestly wowed everyone's biggest expectations in politics. We've gotten, in depth about the process of her becoming the candidate and all that went into President Biden dropping out of the race. And you can go watch some of my episodes from last week to understand more of that. But it's pretty impressive how Vice President Harris, at the bare bones, has managed to harness this crazy amount of enthusiasm that we have not really seen before. It's just the way that she's been able to rally so many people in the Democratic Party. I mean, even when President Biden ran in 2020 and he was doing historically poorly in that primary and then managed to just quickly turn things around like that after the South Carolina primary, his support shot up. But that was only after multiple fourth and fifth place finishes and a lot of months of uncertainty for his campaign. He managed to turn things around pretty quickly and then consolidated the support of his party. That was pretty impressive. But in its own right, this candidacy of Kamala Harris has managed to consolidate in a far more remarkable fashion, faster than anyone would have even expected. She went from not knowing what was going on Sunday afternoon one day to becoming the presumptive Democratic nominee by Monday night. I think it's not talked about enough just how rapidly things changed for Kamala Harris and evolved right in front of our eyes as voters and observers. And Trump was stealing the headlines the entire week before because of the Republican National Convention, which was taking place in Milwaukee, where we saw the Republican Party's historic unity. Forget that ever happened, because no one even remembers that. Because as soon as President Biden posted that historic and famous letter now, no one remembers what happened at the RNC. Forget that. And obviously, there was a ground game working behind the scenes to help Harris consolidate that support from people within her orbit. So it was more of her jumping into the groove. But really, even then, with the 36 hours, her consolidation of support is so mighty. And I find this especially shocking and just interesting, because in my own conversations with so many voters right up until that point, most people didn't like Kamala Harris. They didn't have a very positive view of her, and it mainly came from a series of poor media interviews and misconstrued policy portfolios, such as dealing with the root causes of illegal migration, which Republicans have falsely mischaracterized as her being in charge of the border completely and being the border czar. Those are negative views of her, and those were then reflected in the polls. So, and she was starting off with a really poor approval rating. We've been watching for a long time. Among independents in an ABC News poll from July 19th to July 20th, she had an approval rating that rang in at 28%. That's pretty low and not very impressive. But just a week later, that support surged to a staggering 14 points to 42%. Mind you, that's still underwater, but this 14% increase in approval rating for Harris comes from this rapid consolidation of support among the Democratic base and has exponentially expanded her capabilities as a Democratic candidate. And it's definitely gotten under Trump's skin, especially with his own approval ratings. Because now even from within their own campaign, they are beginning to realize that she is a much stronger candidate than they were even fearing. He went from 35% support among independent voters, which is pretty low in its own right, down 8 points to 27%, which was worse than Harris's 28%. Now, that should not be completely taken for, what it is, because I should note that some of these polls are fluid, because there was one poll that showed Trump at 51%. So it is something that evolves and changes, and we have different perspectives. But beyond the approval rating, we've already talked about the TikTok edits and the huge support among different groups in the Democratic Party, including Black women for Harris, Black men for Harris, LGBTQ folks for Harris, Native people for Harris, white women for Harris. And right now, as we're recording this, there is a White Dudes for Harris call that is activating support among that demographic. So Harris is activating her coalition. And she's also managed to raise $200 million in small dollar donations. That money aspect is staggering. It's the best fundraising show for the Biden-Harris campaign since 2020. So basically, Joe Biden went through his entire re-election campaign and was not able to garner that much support that Harris was able to amass in just a single week of the infancy of her candidacy. Now, there was a race to also define Kamala Harris from the right. Ideally, it would have been to reintroduce her as this leftist radical from San Francisco. However, with controversy coming from Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance, with a lot of unusual comments, such as one criticizing people who don't have children, like this one that I'm going to play right now.
Saying is that we're effectively run in this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices that they've made, and so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too. And it's just a basic fact. You look at Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, AOC, the entire future of the Democrats is controlled by people without children. And how does it make any sense that we've turned our country over to people who don't really have a direct stake in it?
And then comments from former President Donald Trump that hit it out of the park with this Turning Point USA speech that he gave.
And again, Christians, get out and vote just this time. You won't have to do it anymore. 4 more years, you know what? It'll be fixed. It'll be fine. You won't have to vote anymore, my beautiful Christians. I love you, Christians. I'm a Christian. I love you. Get out. You got to get out and vote. In 4 years, you don't have to vote again. We'll have it fixed so good you're not going to have to vote.
These comments have left Republicans trying to justify their candidates' unusual statements, and they have not been able to offer any clear definition. I've heard so many countless explanations, but all of it has given Democrats a really good new talking point. Here's Kamala Harris delivering it.
And you may have noticed Donald Trump has been resorting to some wild lies about my record, and some of what he and his running mate are saying, well, it's just plain weird.
Because let's be honest, some of the stuff that they are saying is just plain weird. And now take Harris, who has taken the internet by storm, and through only the fault of the Republican ticket, there is no need for her to have to defend herself because they are too busy defending themselves from silly things that they say. Now, of course, this race is always going to be changing, so we'll continue to see how things unfold and what's in store. But the way things are headed, I get this feeling that we're going to be talking about a lot more comments like this, and so this race to define Kamala Harris may not be so much of a challenge for her because she's just trying to introduce herself to the nation, while Republicans are going to have to now contend with the weird things that they're saying and also fight this notion that what they are saying is weird. I mean, a lot of things to share. But, that's where I'll leave it for here. When we come back, I will be sharing my sit-down interview exclusive with Representative Nicole Grassi of the 53rd District. It's an interview you don't want to miss. So we'll be right back after this short break with Representative Grassi. In today's fast-paced and chaotic political landscape, it's more important than ever to stay informed and responsible as voters. That's why the Ishan S. Show is here, to help you make sense of it all. It's my mission to democratize news access, provide unbiased reporting, and deliver real analysis on the biggest issues of our time. And I love this job so much because it allows me to teach and inform so many people, specifically young people, about the interesting and ever-changing world of American politics. And so if you find my episodes valuable, please share them with your friends and family. It's the best way to help this show grow. Please don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Spotify, and check out the political news blog and subscribe there on the ishansshow.com for more in-depth analysis. We're also active on X and Instagram, so be sure to follow us there as well for breaking news posts and updates about the show. Every time someone tells me that the Ishan S. Show is the reason they went out to vote or they paid attention to a news cycle, it means the world to me. Thank you for your incredible support over the past 3 years. Your engagement and dedication mean the world to me. And as we head into the final weeks of the 2024 election, I look forward to continuing this journey together. And now we're going to return back to the great episode that we have planned for you. We like to talk local politics here on the Ishan S. Show because as much attention as the national scene may take, what happens at the local level affects all of us a lot more. It's why we like to keep things local here on the Ishan S. Show. Our next guest for today was recently appointed to fill the vacated seat of now State Senator Mark Walker. So joining us for one of our first interviews as a state rep, we are joined by Representative Nicole Grassi. Representative, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Ishan. I'm really happy to be here.
So before we get into the interview, why don't you take a couple moments to introduce yourself to my audience?
Thank you. I'd love to. I am a 36-year resident of the Northwest suburbs. I currently live in Arlington Heights with my husband and daughter. She graduated from Rolling Meadows High School, and she is now a rising junior at Michigan State University studying to be a teacher. My husband was a high school teacher with High School District 214 all of his career. And I have been a hospice chaplain for the past 31 years in the area, visiting people who are terminally ill in their homes and nursing homes and facilities.
Sure. So we'll get into the work you've been doing as a representative, but it is my understanding, and you just mentioned your work as a hospice chaplain and in healthcare in general. Tell me more about your experience in that field and your long career and how that's impacted your civic interests, or how that might have motivated some of the policy work you might be doing.
I think it's a wonderful question because I had no idea this path was going to lead me here, but it really seems to fit quite well. As a hospice chaplain, I am tasked with meeting people at a time of their life where they are facing a crisis or a big concern and issue. And my role has been to meet people where they are, talk about what their concerns or needs are, and see what we can do to find solutions together to help with what matters most to them. And that same kind of public service has really transferred well into this kind of an area as well too. And part of what I found as a hospice chaplain were that there were a lot of needs and concerns for people in the community that were most best addressed and helped by different government services and agencies as well. And so
True.
I was often tasked with making those connections, finding out who could help, what we could do. And I actually started my hospice work during the AIDS crisis. And that was a time where I found a lot of those gaps in care and needs for a lot of our patients and families. And that really encouraged me to start getting involved in the community and trying to work for solutions on a bigger level to help those people who are most in need. And that kind of public service that really involves a whole community approach has been also what led me to run for local village trustee, to bring a healthcare and human service perspective to the village board decisions that affects our everyday lives, that eventually led me to consider to apply for the state representative opening.
Nice. So you did just talk about your time as a township trustee. So beyond just
Village trustee,
our
with
village
Arlington Heights,
trustee,
yes.
Beyond just your work in healthcare, what else motivated you to get into that line of business? Was there anything else going on at the time, or something else that also motivated you to run?
So I'm actually an ordained clergy person in a Protestant denomination called the United Church of Christ.
Okay.
And our entire history has always been about caring for people and working for justice in all its forms. And so that is a big part of what brought me into hospice chaplaincy and has brought me into different causes and concerns within the community, whether it's environmental justice, racial justice, social justice. All those issues have been a long part of my faith tradition that have guided me into trying to just do what I can to make the world a better place for all of us.
Nice. Okay. So most of our viewers are young people, high schoolers, college students. And so they usually get how a normal election to these types of roles works. But you had a bit more of an unusual path coming here. You were appointed to this seat. So what exactly does that process look like, just to educate my viewers? What exactly entails in that sort of thing?
And if I may just add, I have been involved with various political elections. I've been an election judge for a long time. I had no idea how this even worked. So it's not necessarily about an age thing. I don't think this happens that often, but it was a little bit of almost like a domino effect. So State Senator Ann Gillespie was appointed by the governor to be director of insurance.
Right.
So that left an opening in her spot. And part of the rules, and please correct me if I'm needing this, part of the rules are because she was a Democrat was needed to be appointed to fill her position. And part of who decides that are the area township people. And each township person has a different weight of a vote based on how many people voted in their township in the last election. And so the area township people voted to fill Ann Gillespie's position with former state representative Mark Walker. So that left his position, state representative, open. And the same process applied for me then, where the area township people, there were 5 township people who voted, met with all of the applicants, and then voted on who they would choose to fill that up, to be appointed in that position. Let me backtrack. Part of the process, and I really appreciate this, I believe there were 8 candidates for the state representative position, of which I applied. And we had a public forum on Zoom for people to ask questions ahead of time, and we would answer together as a group. And then we had a public forum that week with all the township people, and the community were welcome and invited. And so it was all a very public process for that interview and appointment.
Right. So I guess a bit more of a personal take. How did it feel when you found out that you were selected for this role? How did it feel?
It was humbling, and I realized the important honor and responsibility, and I was very grateful. I also was grateful to have met a number of people who also applied, many of which, we are now working together on common causes. So that's been a wonderful thing. It's felt very similar to winning the election for village trustee. I hoped to win. I did everything I could to make sure people knew who I was and what I stood for and what I hope to do to support the community. So it was similar to that, but I realized the importance of this position, and I take that very seriously.
Well, very good. I mean, I can imagine it's a pretty nice feeling. So let's shift gears a little. I have been talking to voters and constituents alike all around the area, and I've been hearing all sorts of issues come up when it comes to policy concerns. You've not been in the position that long, but I'm sure you've talked to some constituents. What are some of the biggest issues you're hearing right now that your constituents are having that they want you to help address?
That's a great question, and I am just starting. So I'm actually looking forward to being able to knock a lot of doors and hear a lot more from the constituents about what their needs and concerns are. Mm-hmm. I am familiar from especially the Arlington Heights area, but I really look forward to looking into the Rolling Meadows, Mount Prospect, and the other areas to meet with the constituents and hear. I think one of the biggest concerns I'm hearing is just affordability.
Yeah.
You know, the value placed on public schools, but just how expensive a lot of things are. I'm hearing a lot of that. And I'd love to hear what you have been hearing.
Well, you know, I mean, the affordability crisis is definitely coming up. We are hearing, and actually that is by far what I'm hearing the most. If I had to put a number on it, I'd honestly say like 80-85%. But people also bring up public safety, gun control, and we just had Sherry Williams on yesterday. We were talking about it there, prevalent issue in this area, education. But as we look at the rest of your term, which runs through January, what are your priorities when it comes to these issues, and what are some things you hope to at least work on or get started with before your term is up for this term?
Good question. You know, I come from a healthcare and human service perspective, so that is definitely part of my heart, especially affordable and accessible healthcare. Continuing to be a strong supporter of reproductive rights is a very important concern. I hear from many people that I will be a supporter of myself. Mm-hmm. And I also am a strong supporter of the need for improved and accessible mental health support for all of us. Especially, I do hear a lot of concerns with just the heightened anxiety that many of our people are feeling from all levels, especially younger people. Yeah. And that is probably one of the biggest issues I've heard a lot about, is just that anxiety that is constant and present. And what do we do with it? How do we find help with that? And I've heard a number of people talk about just even some of the shooter drill trainings, how that is so anxiety producing for young people, not to mention just the concern with gun violence and need for help with that. So anyway, I can be a supporter of that. But I also do want to hear more from the constituents who I'm representing to find out what they are wanting and needing me to do as their voice.
Sure. And if any constituents are listening, I'm sure they are. What is the best way to get in touch with your office in case something comes up?
Oh, thank you. And I hope they do. I welcome all comments and questions and concerns. There are a couple ways. You can always call us at 847-749-1137 or contact@staterepgrassy.com. Mm-hmm. Those are two good ways to be in touch. But we also have a new Instagram and Facebook. We will be getting a Threads page soon, but I think you can contact us on those. But I would think maybe the phone and the email might be a little faster and better way to communicate quickly. But I really would welcome any sort of comments from anyone to hear more about what matters to you and what concerns you have and ways I can be of support.
That's great to hear. So listeners, if you have any concerns and you're from the 53rd, feel free to use those avenues to get in touch with Representative Grassy.
May I talk about some of the district of the 53rd? Just so people kind of know that. Yes. It kind of starts out at Harper College. Yes. Covers most of Rolling Meadows, southern part of Arlington Heights, most of Mount Prospect, and a little bit of kind of Maine, is a little bit beyond, just a tiny bit of Maine Township. Sure. So, but it's all that entire area is the 53rd district. Perfect.
So again, if you are from those areas, and then there's always a great way to look it up. I'll link a few resources in the description as well if you want to get a more specific focus, because I know at the borders it gets a little, even with myself. Yes. I'm right at the border of the 51st, the 53rd, and the 54th, so it's kind of weird and mushy there. But yeah, I'll put a resource in the description so that people can better act, and that should also have some contact information as well. But unfortunately, we are almost out of time for this interview. So before I let you go, are there any parting thoughts that you wanted to share with my audience?
I want to share that being involved and sharing your voice matters in all politics, local, state, and federal. And I really want to encourage everybody to share your voice, use your voice, vote, and encourage everybody else you know to vote, because that's how we can have what matters be a part of the priorities for all of the area governments.
All right, Representative Nicole Grassy, thank you so much for joining us. We hope to have you back on soon.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a good day.